All you Vietnam veterans here today who were not properly welcomed home decades ago, welcome home. Three years ago, a gentleman by the name of John Thomas must have been up late one night, surfing the internet or something, and ran across a little article that said that the Navy had one remaining gun barrel from the battleship Arizona, sitting in a storage yard in Northern Virginia. If I'm correct, I think he saw something to the effect that if something wasn't done with it in the next 5 or 6 years, that the Navy would sell it for scrap. The barrel was not on the battleship on December 7th of 1941. It had been removed several months prior to that, was back east being relined. Not wanting to be wasteful, of course, the Navy later used it on the USS Nevada. It saw action on D-Day, shelling Utah Beach as part of the Normandy invasion. Well, John Thomas showed up in my office the morning after he saw this article. He asked me if I knew that the Navy had one remaining gun barrel from the battleship Arizona. I did not know that. His next question is the one that got me. He said, would you take the lead on behalf of the state of Arizona to see if we could get the Navy to give or loan or something that barrel to us? So I called the Navy. Now that's quite a proposition in and of itself. Robin Staten, who is here in the audience with us today. Robin was the director, ready for this? The director of the Department of Inactive Ships. Well, I asked Robin, I said, this is Secretary of State Ken Bennett from Arizona. I hear you have one remaining gun barrel left over from the Arizona. He said, yes, we do. I said, well, would you loan it or give it to us or whatever? We can put it out here by the anchor and the signal mast that we already have from the ship. His first response was, I'm not sure I want to get rid of the last Arizona barrel. We think that's pretty special. But would you like one from the battleship Missouri? We have 7 of those. Well, I reminded him that I was calling from Arizona. And then somehow the thought occurred to me to ask for both barrels. And I suggested that if he'd give us the one Arizona barrel and one of the Missouri barrels, we'd restore them and put them out here as the bookends of the war. One to represent the beginning, one to represent the end. I'm going to give you my best interpretation of Robin Staten at that moment. This is what he said. He goes, ooh, you're thinking big now. Said, I like big thinking. I think I can get behind a project like that. So with all due respect to our federal government, now we know why there's a $17 trillion national debt. Because if you ask for one something, the answer is no, but you ask for 2 and they can do that. Now the Missouri barrel was on board the Missouri on September 2nd, 1945. It's gun barrel 387 off of turret 2. When the Japanese came on to sign the treaty to surrender and end World War II. When the barrels were first brought out here a couple of years ago, we had a little ceremony. A gentleman walked up to me, who's with us in the audience today, and he said, I was on the Missouri the day the Japanese came on. And I was so impressed, and then he said, no, it's better than that. He said, I served as a gunner in turret number 2. I have fired that barrel 1,000 times. That's Jack Brock, who's with us here today. Jack. Many stories about the war and about the ships and the people have been shared in the making of this memorial, and so many people have put themselves in our path to help. And I'm just going to tell you the story now. We got permission to retrieve the barrels. Now, would the state legislature support the construction of a monument? As we were looking into the possibility of having the barrels installed here, we discovered that there was not an actual World War II memorial here in Wesley Boland Plaza. There's a memorial dedicated to every other U.S. war except World War II. Now, we think that happened because decades ago, someone acquired the anchor and the signal mast, and when those got placed out here, I think people just assumed that was kind of our de facto World War II memorial. But a World War II memorial had never been dedicated in this plaza, and we felt it was time to do so. Not one dime of taxpayer money has been used in the construction of this memorial. It's all been done with private funds. They'd been sitting in grass fields in Northern Virginia for 50 or 60 years. If you'll notice, the barrels are not the same color. Best as we could research, we have reflected the actual color of what the barrels were when they were on the Arizona and on the Missouri, but they are slightly different shades of gray. The gun barrels, let's move them apart 405 inches from center of barrel to center of barrel, each inch representing 1,000 American lives lost in World War II. And then in between the two barrels, let's erect 9 pillars representing the 9 minutes that it took the Arizona to sink. And on the sides of those pillars, let's hang a nameplate for each of the almost 2,000 Arizonans who were killed in their service in World War II. Provide a mechanism through which we could sell the bricks that you will see, and many of you have donated and have your family's names or honored one of your family members on the bricks. 1,970 name tags representing the men and women lost. I hope over the next years that people will take the time, as I have begun to start doing, and I'll see a name on one of those sides, look down at the bottom left nameplate, and it said, it was kind of a unique name. I'd never heard the name S-T-A-P-P, STAP. Just caught my eye for some reason. Then I noticed that the first name was Billy, but it was with an I-E. So it's a woman. Then I look above that nameplate, and I think there's a Kenneth Stapp. And then I look over and up about 2 or 3, and I see, I believe it was Richard Stapp. Now, I haven't met any Stapps in my life, but I'll bet that if there's probably 3 who gave the ultimate sacrifice from one family here in our state. 2 men and a woman. Someday I hope to meet someone from the Stapp family so that they can tell me the story of those 3 names. You'll notice that the name tags are free hanging, and so when the wind blows, it looks like water or waves. Painted the ribs in that gorgeous Arizona flag blue. The most obvious gifts are, of course, the saddles that hold those gun barrels and the 9 metal sculptures that represent the 9 minutes and are intended to look like the hull of the Arizona. In the process, we also learned that there are but a few still living USS Arizona survivors, and we have 3 with us today. There's only 9 still left. And I would like the survivors of the USS Arizona, Vito Colonna, Don Stratton, and Lauren Bruner, to stand and be recognized. Thank you, Arizona survivors. I don't know Lauren's story yet, and we've heard a little bit about Vito's story. And I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm going to tell it anyway about Don Stratton's story. I believe Don was on the back of the ship. I don't know where he was on the ship. You were in the front? Oh my goodness. When the ship exploded, 1 deck below the bridge, above the bridge, sorry. I'll tell you the story as soon as he corrects me on everything I try to tell you. Don and Lauren were together, okay. Both were burned over half of their body. Sailors from the ship next to them, the Vestal, threw ropes over, which were tied off, and they went hand over hand, half of their body burned, to get over to the Vestal and try to survive. Other shipmates didn't make it, fell into the burning oil in the water and perished. Don was telling me that he was in a hospital for over a year. When he recovered, he re-enlisted and went through boot camp a second time to serve his country. Years later, when he tried to buy a firearm, and wherever he was required fingerprints to be taken, the people trying to take his fingerprints were shocked that he doesn't have any fingerprints. They were burned off on December 7th, 1941. But I think they gave him a gun anyway. Thank you, Vito, Don, and Lauren, for your service. There's a bottle of wine in the State Capitol Museum given to the United States by the country of Spain. It's signed by President Gerald R. Ford, and that bottle of wine is dedicated and set aside in its display case to be opened by the last survivor from the USS Arizona. And as we said earlier, out of the 1,500 or so that were assigned to the ship, almost 1,200 were killed on December 7th. Their names, 1,177 names of sailors and Marines around the base of the anchor. The other 300 or so survived, but we're down to 9. We're down to 9 survivors of the USS Arizona. Thanks, guys. We needed a way to anchor these great big gun barrels. Now let me tell you about the Arizona barrel weighs 70 tons. The heaviest vehicle you can drive on an Arizona freeway fully loaded is 40 tons. And the Arizona barrel weighs almost twice that. It's 56 feet long, 54 feet long, and weighs 70 tons and shoots a 14-inch shell, I believe about 20 miles or something like that. The Missouri barrel is a 16-inch barrel, 68 feet long, weighs 140 tons. Under this ground are truckloads and truckloads of cement and rock. We went so far as to figure out how long the ships were and installed 2 markers. They're little granite bricks, probably 4 by 8 maybe, or 6 by 10. The Arizona marker is 608 feet west of us from the center of the flagpole near the anchor. It's just near the Father Kino statue, if you can see the Father Kino statue. The Missouri length was 887 feet. And at the base of the Frank Luke statue, just by the flags in front of the Capitol, you can find a little marker for the Missouri. We had one employee who came out, was randomly assigned to one of the pillars. He was hanging names, and he goes to grab one, just random out of one of the boxes. It's his uncle from Globe, who had perished in the war. He called a friend of mine in Prescott, whose father had passed away, former mayor of Prescott. Called Dayton. I said, we're going to get to your dad's panel in a few days. Do you want to come down and hang your dad's name? He shocked me. He said, no. He says, I want my son, who's named after his grandfather, to come with me, and his older brother. And the 3 of them came down the next day and hung their dad's nameplate. I have been but a small piece of helping make this happen, but it's been an honor to lead the way in completing this monument to our greatest generation.